Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is wind. And this verb may look a lot like yesterday's verb, but I hope you can detect a difference in pronunciation. Today we're going to be focusing on the short I vowel sound. So there are two ways to pronounce W-I-N-D, but they're going to have very different meanings. And I want to say a special thanks to Luis, who made a written comment requesting this verb, and I have a feeling he meant the long I pronunciation, but his idea inspired me to think about all the different ways that we can use this verb. So thanks a lot, Luis. I appreciate it. Now, let's spend a moment and review some of the ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might encounter this verb, again pronounced with a short I, wind, means to cause someone to have difficulty breathing, either due to exertion, so think kind of physical movement, really physical exercise, or because there's been a blow to the stomach, so some type of contact, and it sort of creates this momentary difficulty in breathing. A second way you can encounter this verb might be to detect the presence of a person or animal by scent. So if you're someone who maybe studies animals, works with animals, maybe if you're a hunter, you might encounter this usage, but it is a lot less common. And I should note this short I pronunciation and its meaning is less common than the long I pronunciation and the many different meanings that we discussed in yesterday's video. For now, you should know that wind with a short I pronunciation again is a regular verb. This is different than the long I pronunciation of this word. Right? That's something that makes English so incredibly challenging. So for this verb, if you want to make the progressive form of the verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms winding. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. Now the base verb, wind, ends with a D sound. So that means when I add that ed ending, I'm going to add an extra syllable to the verb. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this. Winded, winded. Okay. Now you might be happy to know we don't have any phrasal verbs after having so many to talk about yesterday. So instead, we'll move on and do a little verb tense review and a little verb tense practice with our verb. Today, I thought it would be good to review the simple past tense and the present progressive. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions that occurred at a known point in the past. Many times, simple past tense sentences will contain specific time references. It might use a word like yesterday. It can even use specific dates, but not every sentence in the simple past tense will have this sort of time marker to them. Instead, it can be implied as part of a longer conversation or as part of a longer reading passage. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our pattern is going to stay the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, we're going to have our subject and we're going to then use that ed form of the verb because the short I is a regular verb. Here's an example sentence. That last sprint winded me. Right? So here maybe we have two athletes that are on the same team and they're talking about like a kind of challenging part to their practice. Maybe they've been running really short distances, but as fast as they can, so a sprint, and right, saying that particular action caused them to have some difficulty kind of breathing or getting their heart rate maybe to slow down a little bit. Now, if you want to make a sentence in the simple past tense, but in the negative, what we're going to do again is start with our subject, but this time we'll use did not and then the base verb. Here's another example sentence. The game didn't wind him at all. So back to that first definition. Again, here we're saying someone didn't have any difficulty breathing. They didn't seem to be short of breath. Now let's take a look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, you'll want to start with did, then you're going to have your subject, and then the base verb. I always like to point out to my students, notice I am not adding the ed form of my verb in the negative or in a yes or no question. Here's another example. Did the fox win the rabbit, or did he spot it first? Here we're kind of wondering which sense did this particular animal use to catch its prey. Now let's move on and make some sentences in the present progressive. This verb tense is also known as the present continuous, and we can use it to either describe an action that is happening right now, or an action that is in progress, or one that is continuing during a time period that has not yet been completed. Now, many teachers and textbooks use present continuous. That's just fine. It means exactly the same thing. I say present progressive with my students because I hope they'll remember 2 P's mean that you need 2 parts to make your verb. So here we're going to be using the present form of be, and then we'll use the ing form of the verb. So in the affirmative, this means we've got to pay attention to our subject because there are 3 forms of be in the simple present. So if my subject is I'm going to say am, and then the ing form of the verb. But if my subject is you, we, or they, I'll use are, and then the ing form of the verb. Finally, if my subject is he, she, or it, I'll use is, and then that ing form of the verb. Let's look at our affirmative example. This workout is winding me, right? So making it very difficult to breathe, right? I'm exerting myself so much that I'm probably gasping for breath. Now let's look at making a negative present progressive sentence. To do this, again, pay attention to your subject, then use the form of be that matches, followed by not, then that ing form the verb. Here's another example. Today's activities aren't winding me. So here, again, maybe it's people in a workout class of some kind. And that particular person is suggesting, right, this maybe isn't too physically difficult or isn't requiring as much physical exertion as other days. Now, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present progressive. To do this, start with your form of be, whatever form matches your subject, that subject comes next, then use the ing form of the verb. Here's the last example. Is the animal winding its prey? So that's going to go back to that second definition where we're talking about using the sense of smell in order to detect it. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb. And naturally, we're going to start with the noun form of this word. And we're, again, just focusing on the noun form with a short I pronunciation. So the noun wind can have a number of different meanings. I think I've picked out 4 of the more commonly used ones for us to discuss. And the first way you'll hear this noun used is to refer to the natural movement of air, especially in the form of a current of air blowing from a particular direction. So this is part of our weather and part of many weather reports, right? So an example of this could be, what direction is the wind blowing? Right? So right here, it's out of the southwest, it's out of the northeast, etc. Okay. Now, a second way to use the noun wind is to use it to talk about a source of energy, could be at someone's home. It could be sort of industrially created or generated. And again, it's coming from that movement of air. So an example of how you might hear this used, someone might ask, is that plant using solar or wind? So there's, again, trying to note what kind of the source of the power or the electricity that's being created. Another way to use the noun wind is to talk about breath as it's needed for physical exertion or perhaps even in speech. So an example of this might be, he just had the wind knocked out of him. So this is going to go back to that first definition of our verb where we talked about a blow to the stomach, right? So something hit him and created that sort of short-term difficulty breathing. Another way you might encounter the noun wind used is as a short form to describe woodwind instruments. This could include things like flutes and clarinets and piccolos and many other instruments, but you'll notice these come from using one's breath. So an example of how you could hear this used in a sentence: the wind section sounded great. This is most commonly used in connection with orchestras. I don't know if we'd hear it so much if it was just a soloist playing a particular song. So again, though you might hear the wind section, or some people will use that entire phrase, woodwind. Now, let's move on to another word. Something you might encounter is the adjective windy. So this is generally describing something that is marked by or exposed to strong or more powerful winds, that natural movement of the air. So an example of this might be, we've had some windy weather this last week. Right? You'll notice certain parts of the world may have stronger winds than others, or certain times of year could lead to this greater quantity, or maybe more noticeable quantity of powerful movement of air. Another word you might encounter is the noun windbreaker. This refers to a type of jacket. It generally has some very thin fabric to it, and its purpose is to resist the wind, right? So it's not going to let you be as chilled as quickly. It might also protect you from some light rain. A way you might hear this used in a sentence could be, you should pack a windbreaker for the hike. It gets colder at the top of the mountain, right? So someone, doesn't want someone to become so cold they're unable to continue, or they're just making their hike a little more unpleasant. Well, thank you again to Luis for suggesting W-I-N-D as a verb of the day. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.